Hello guys, this is Tori. How are you doing? I just grabbed myself a cup of tea and I'm ready to tell you a little bit about color theory and why you should be flexible with it. Okay, let's start from the very basis, just so we know what we're talking about. You all know the infamous color wheel, and you're probably familiar with different color types, these three. And you're probably familiar with relations, which are these. But what does this really mean for us painters? Well, it's not that simple, right? To that color wheel, we need to add different levels of saturation. Now we see it's not only the right color relation that will give us a nice color scheme, but it's also the level of saturation. And that should be it, right? Well, in theory, so no, not really. Maybe in terms of a design where you don't use shading and you do need a specific color palette. In painting, however, you can be and you should be way more flexible in using colors. In fact, you can use any color you want and your painting is still probably gonna look good. And I'm gonna prove it to you today. So I prepared a sketch from this photo. It's a really nice face and I will show you in this example how you can approach a painting. As you can see, this photo is pretty monochromatic. We have lots and lots of brown tones in here and a little bit of orange popping in the shirt, which balances it out. But let me tell you some important notes first before we jump into painting. In a bright scenery, cool colors, so blues and greens, will pull your painting back, so to speak. And the warm colors, so red, will bring the painting forwards. What that means is that the human eye perceives blues and greens in bright scenery as not as bright as red. However, in a dark scenery, red will be perceived as darker and blues and greens will come off as brighter. And this is important, so remember about this. I know it's a bit confusing, but I promise it will make sense later. And in the description box, there is going to be a website that explains how we perceive color, so you can read it if you're interested in that. Another thing is that when you paint, you want to use the strongest non-colors, that means black and white, at the very end. And I will repeat what everybody repeats. I strongly encourage you not to use black and white. And if you actually do, please use it in the smallest amounts at the very end. But then you might ask, how do you show highlights and shadows? Well, when you sit down to the painting, decide on your lightest color and your darkest color. For me here, I think I will use this pinkish, purplish light color. And for the dark one, I will use this dark blue. Because this is a bright scenery, so blue is going to deepen in the shadow. I will try to use them at the very end of my painting, because to make this work, you don't want to overdo it. And believe me when I say, it is very easy to overdo. Okay, let's start with it, because now is my favorite part. Oh, right. Another side note. You see this skin tone? At the first glance, you can think, yes, this is some combination of brown and orange and red and yellow, because generally this is what our skin is made of. It's a lighter shade or a darker shade, but it still comes down to those shades. This reference, for example, is extremely brown. That's why I chose it. But you need to realize this is an artistic choice of the photographer. But in painting terms, this can get pretty boring. Now look at your palm. For real, look at it. I don't know if you can see, but in my palm, I see my veins. Just a tiny bit of blue and green peeking through my skin. In some places, the skin also gets even purple. It just seems like the mix of red on my skin and the blue underneath it mixes together and gives that color. And then my skin has also this yellowish shade. The tips of my fingers are red because I was typing, and in the creases of my finger I have these dark red lines. There is also a shadow on one side that makes my skin look kinda grey. Of course, we all come in different shades, but you need to understand, skin is everything but one color. You have blood underneath your skin, veins and muscles. your skin is thinner and thicker in different places. It looks different, stretched out or relaxed. Your skin isn't also one color in all of the places. And that being said, I want you to dump all of your favorite colors on that portrait. Because when I described my poem, I mentioned all of the colors from the color wheel. This sounds crazy, I know. But relax. Painting is fun and mixing colors is fun. But remember to choose some base color. Using this reference, you can see the base color for me is going to be this orange-brown color. Because you don't want to lose the skin tone of that person you're painting. And think about it realistically as well. The cheeks usually get red because they have more blood in them. But the forehead has a thinner skin and less blood underneath, so it's probably not gonna get so red. The nose gets red as well, so maybe a little bit of red will be nice there too. I personally love using red. I think it really makes the person look more alive. Next, you can put some purple and blue and yellow, and then we blend. You don't need to be accurate with this, of course, unless you want to make a painting that's really photorealistic. Personally, I don't really do it often. I like to add some more color because colors are the main reason why I started painting in the first place. So whenever I can, I will use more colors. Alright, so we have that. I will take you through some key things that I did. I can't explain everything that I do because even I don't understand some things. You need to trust your intuition and make decisions based on that. And the more you paint, the better your vision is gonna be. But I still can give you some tips. So after I put all of the colors, as I said, I also chose a main base color for the skin. That color can be anywhere from the light red to dark brown. Or if you're painting an alien, it can be green. Really, you can choose whatever base you want. So if you're painting in Photoshop, you can look at this color picker and get a headache. We literally have every color in the world to pick from. This is digital art, right? We have too many choices. And it's also not in the form of color wheel. So this might be confusing. But I know an easy tip to deal with it. So let's look at this. Let's say you picked your base color and now you want to make that color a little bit darker because there is more shading in there. Don't choose color with less saturation. Don't go in those dark shades, dark gray shades. Move your color hue a bit up or down and then move your cursor a bit down. If you're making a shadow and if you want a lighter color, move it up. This way you'll be still in the same saturation range, but your color will hold better on the canvas and you will avoid this dirty look that a lot of people get when they just start out of painting. That's also the main reason why people tell you not to mix anything with black, because black gives you this kind of dirty looking colors. Even in terms of color theory, it's literally called the purity of the color. So you want to keep the purity of that color at the same level. With darker and lighter skin tones, you can do pretty much the same process. The only difference is that you will want to pick darker or lighter shades of every color and have the base also darker or lighter. And well, if we are talking about darker complexions, highlights are definitely more satisfying. But they are still very easy to overdo, so remember, do it at the very end. Yeah, I'm showing you a mid-tone just because I like the reference photo and because it's quite monochromatic, so I can prove my point better. Another thing that you can do is get yourself some paint brushes that change colors by slightly shifting the hue and saturation. I will try to link you to those brushes. They're absolutely incredible and it is the easiest way to get this color variety without stressing about choosing the right colors. Don't rely on them. This is for mixing purposes. They won't paint everything for you. You still need to blend everything together. And as you can see in my painting, I do a lot of blending. I put the color, then I blend it again, then I put another color on top of that and then blend it again, because you need to be very patient with this. You also should avoid painting on white canvas. Put some other color behind it. It really is to your own preference. A lot of people paint on different shades of gray because that color is the most neutral one, and it kind of gives you the best accuracy, because you know, colors kind of change depending on what surrounding they are in, right? I chose light beige, but literally anything that's not white. This way you'll start your painting at a neutral color, and it will be easier for you to move to those highlights later on and see where those highlights should be. At the beginning, I like to mark the eyes, eyebrows and lips with darker color, not the blue though. To have a better overview of the face, I also turn the opacity of the sketch down to barely visible, because this way I can have a better control of the features and how my painting is actually looking. If you're gonna put your sketch at 100 opacity, very big chances are that you're gonna live in this illusion of your painting looking amazing, and then you're gonna take it off and your painting is just mess, total mess. After dumping all of the colors, I am aware she was looking like a clown, but as you can see, it's getting better. Always trust the process. The key thing in succeeding in this is probably to be very light with your brush. I often put my brush even on like 70% of opacity, so I have a better control, and you want to really take time in blending. With time, when you get more skilled, you'll be able to pick the right colors just like that. You won't have to blend that much. But if you can't do it yet, it's fine. You just need to keep on blending until a right color pops up. Here I added some yellow to the skin. Looking at the surroundings is always useful. If you get stuck on choosing the colors, look at the surroundings, and if you don't see the surroundings, imagine them. Maybe she's sitting in the grass, maybe there is sun above it, maybe she has red pants, or maybe there is something very colorful just next to her, or like a blue lamp. I don't know. You can make things up, keep it in mind, and then you can apply the slight nuances. But sometimes it's difficult because references are usually very strongly edited. So if your reference is making it hard for you to see all the shades, apply curves to it. You can find it under Window, then Adjustments, and finally Curves. You can also use levels. Use that to minimize the highlights, so you can see all of the shades better and the actual shape of the subject you're painting. Ideally, you want to do it at the beginning, but I forgot to do it. And now I realize that my painting is too bright, but it's okay, we can always mix some more darker shades into it. And remember to always go back to this base shade you set for yourself. So yes, you can see the theory I told you about before coming to life. The added blue seems way darker than the brown I used in the eyes, but this blue will go only in the darkest places. It's all about balancing it. If you put blue everywhere, you will lose the slight nuances that actually make the painting more interesting. And again, trust the process. Keep zooming in and out and check with your sketch. When we're working with so many colors, it's often easy to forget about the proportions and where and what should be. But also relax. If you don't like something, you can always paint over it. At the end, I like to go and adjust the curves again. Then I merge them with the painting. You can see I painted it all in one layer. It's because I'm comfortable doing it. I know I can always paint over something if I don't like it or if it doesn't work out. I'm not really, I'm comfortable. I'm just comfortable with it. But I am aware not a lot of people are. So I can always just put the curve layer and then make another layer on top of it and just keep on painting. I usually paint the hair on a different layer. If the hair falls on the face, then it's useful, but in this case I didn't really have to do it. Another test I like to do is to go to Adjustments and choose Color Look. I then go through all the filters. I believe Photoshop comes with them. But what I do is I try all of them. I do it to see my values and shading and if it's holding together. I just discovered over the years that if your shading is wrong, no filter will save it. So now I like to do it just to check. And sometimes I will also see a filter that I like better than my shading that will actually fix some of the mistakes that I made. So I apply it. Like here, for example, I chose brown color for the hair, but then I realized she has black hair and in my pic didn't really show that. And I tried to add some purple and blue in there to balance it out, but it was still too warm. And the filter fixed that hue. This is digital painting. We have the possibility to adjust the hues and the brightness of everything. So make use of that. And now, of course, I could easily spend a few more hours on this painting and go more into even more detail and more blending and try to bring as close to the reference photo as possible. But I believe references are guides, not the ultimate end goal, unless you're doing hyperrealism. But remember, sometimes leaving brush strokes and not blending everything to the maximum is good. It gives your painting more structure and more texture and makes it more interesting. Anyway, people, I feel like I've been talking for ages. Here's my finished painting. I hope you all enjoyed this. And I know it's probably a different approach to what you usually hear, but I wanted to show you that mixing colors doesn't need to be that much of a struggle. Obviously, you need practice. So if you try this and the first time doesn't really work out, try again. Don't give up. Alright? Don't give up. It's not usually about making your painting the most colorful piece ever. You just want this different color hues peeking through the painting. Here are different examples of the paintings I did before using these techniques. I don't use this technique always, but whenever I feel like the painting gets boring, I pop some random color in there and mix it. Anyway, I hope someone is actually gonna try this method and show me. If you do, please tag me, and on Twitter, on Instagram, even on TikTok, wherever you want, tell me in the comments. If someone actually does this, I will cry from happiness. Anyway, I'm looking forward to it. Okay, like and subscribe if you like this video. I will be posting every Saturday. This is a new painting, animation, art related channel. I really hope to have a nice community of people that just love painting, and I hope to inspire you, show you new techniques every week, and yeah, just have fun. So if you want to come next week, you're welcome to join me, but for now, have an amazing day and I will see you next week. Bye bye.